It's an all St. Louis show this week. Mike Rahlmann of the Be Our Guest podcast is here, and you're listening to the Tomorrow Society podcast. Thanks so much for joining me here on episode 31 of the Tomorrow Society podcast. There are so many great Disney podcasts out there. It really means a lot that you guys would take the time to listen to this show. And I've been following podcasts for a really long time, going back to the mid-2000s, whether it's through movie podcasts, through early Disney podcasts like Lou Mangello's Mouse Tunes or Inside the Magic or WDW Today originally. All of those shows are what got me interested again, really, in Disney as an adult and made me eventually want to start a podcast. And I found it interesting to see how shows build a community. You can know so much about Disney or any topic and be a good speaker, but that isn't enough. You need that X factor. And I've seen this in a podcast in a different realm that I've been involved with a bit, which is Rob Has a Podcast, which focuses on Survivor, Big Brother, reality TV. Rob Cesternino, who runs that show, has done such a good job in building the community. He puts out a really good show that's a lot of fun, but what's made it different and gotten so many people engaged is how people feel like they're part of the show. And I've seen that same approach work with Mike Rahlmann of the Be Our Guest podcast. He is our guest today, and I talked to him a lot about what got him into doing a podcast and how he's been able to connect with such a community of fans and listeners. Because I really get the impression that that group feels like they're not just passive listeners. They're an active part of the show, and a lot of that has to do with Mike and his co-hosts Rikki and Pam. Before I get to my conversation with Mike, I did want to give a reminder quickly about leaving reviews and ratings on iTunes or other podcast services. On the Apple Podcast app, you can search for Tomorrow Society Podcast, easily go in there and leave a rating and review. And for the people that have already done so, I really appreciate it. It means a lot that you've taken the time to say some kind words about the show. Okay, let's get to my conversation with Mike Rahlmann. Okay, well, my guest today is the host of the long-running Be Our Guest podcast, which has been covering Walt Disney World for almost 10 years. And more importantly, he is a fellow St. Louisan here in Missouri. Thank you for doing the podcast.
That's right. Should we talk about Yachty winning another Gold Glove or some ooey gooey butter cake we're going to have later after the show? Where should we go with this?
There's so many ways. We could just listeners could drop. I could talk about toaster ravioli or about Mizzou football, or I don't know. There's so many ways we can go with this. So it's tough to hold back.
That's right. We're proud of our heritage here in the Show Me State. You know, we like to talk about it, and we may have bigger cities in the United States, but we're proud of our region here in the Midwest.
Yeah, and especially, when the teams are doing well, which isn't totally the case now, but I think it's going to change with basketball, so we'll see.
That's right. I was there actually for the Mizzou Madness where they showed off the dunk contest and the three-point contest, and we almost took it to the team that we're not going to mention here on the show over to our west, the big boring rectangle, but we're going to have a good season.
I think so. Whenever I start a Mizzou basketball podcast, you will be my first guest, and we will talk it through.
That's right. My daughter's actually working for the women's basketball team this year out at Mizzou. She's a manager, so be out in Columbia often.
Excellent. Yeah. So I don't get there as much as I'd like, but I went to school there, so it's always fun to get back.
Good stuff. MIZ.
All right. Yeah. ZOU. Okay. Well, now back to the people are just like, what are they talking about? But the few people from St. Louis are loving this. So this is worth it for them, I think. We are recording episode 31 of my podcast, and I feel good about that. I'm feeling good. And then I look at your show, and you have almost 1,250 episodes.
Yeah.
How do you keep it up? How do you explain this longevity for your show with just your consistency is incredible?
I think it gets back to my dad and just my upbringing that if you're going to do something, you got to do it right. You got to be consistent and you have to give 100% effort into your, whatever you're going towards, your goals. You know, I've grown up listening but I mean, since podcasting matured and came about, probably about 2005, 2006, I listened to lots of shows. And the one thing that got me coming back to podcasts I like, the ones that I really enjoyed right off the bat were WDW Today, back with the original four guys.
Yeah.
Inside the Magic. And the thing was, they were always there. You know, they always put out shows. There was something consistently to look forward to 3 times a week or once a week, whatever it was. You know, when I have a show that's missing, you know, and I feel like, you know, where did it go? And I was expecting this, and I don't want our listeners to feel that. So we try to be there, you know, 3 times a week with something that's worth your time to listen to. We don't want to just give you filler, but you know, it's one of those things that every show, our numbers grow, it seems like, over the last 10 years, and it becomes more fun. The larger the community becomes, the more the fun there is to be had. And it's the thing I look forward to 3 times a week, recording the show.
Yeah. And the consistency, like you said, I've noticed it, especially since you start, you know, years ago with the iPod, you'd go and you'd refresh, and that was cool. But now with the way the phones are set up, I feel like I just blink and there's another show and another show, especially from consistent shows like yours. And that's addictive because people just, it becomes a habit, and not in a bad way. I mean, in a good way. But like you said, WTW Today is a show that when I was getting into podcasting, it was just on. I always listened to every episode, no matter what they were talking about. And I think you can definitely see the connections there with how you do your show, which you started it back in 2008. And I know you said you were into podcasting. So what excited you so much about podcasting that made you want to start your own?
Well, it's funny how podcasts evolve and come about, because I know a lot of our listeners over the years have started their own shows, and I love seeing that, you know, saying, oh, you know, I listened to yours and I thought it'd be fun, so we started ours. And I love hearing that, because way back in probably 2006, I was a guest on WDW Today, back on episode 200 something. I mean, it was just like so fun talking to Matt, Mike and Len about taking road trips down to Walt Disney World. And I thought, man, that was a lot of fun. And I have an advantage where my dad, he works in radio here in St. Louis, and we also, growing up, owned a mobile DJ company. So I was always behind the microphone anyway, doing a prom or every wedding reception. I've been in every wedding reception hall in the greater St. Louis area that you can imagine. I did high school dances. So, you know, in that aspect, I was always behind the microphone emceeing things. But what I really wanted to do, I'd always wanted to work in radio. But I was nervous about taking a position like that because of the uncertainty of employment. You know, you can get bad numbers and all of a sudden you're blown out. I'd seen my dad go through that many times. So I got into education. I was an elementary school teacher just because I enjoyed that. And that was a very stable, safe job to start a family. So I got to kind of have the best of both worlds. I got to use some of that emceeing, you know, hosting skills that I gained over the years. Plus, I was talking about something I loved, which was, you know, Disney, and something that's just fun, nothing too serious. And, you know, it's a great outlet. And the thing I've noticed is, like you mentioned, is that it has become more and more easy to access podcasts. And podcasts have become very mainstream over the last 3 or 4 years with things like Serial, you know, just getting more in the public eye. You know, you hear the word podcasting more, man. You know, ESPN's always mentioning, you know, download this podcast, or CBS Evening News, you know, this segment is a podcast. And I think, you know, with the lexicon being out there now, that podcasting is something that isn't just for nerds and geeks, you know, and I say that, you know, lovingly, because I think we're all a little bit in that category. But, you know, I think that it's such an easy way to get niche information, and, you know, because you're not going to hear a Disney podcast on the radio, but you can devour hundreds of Disney podcasts on demand on your smartphone right now, which is an amazing thing.
Yeah, and it's still almost, it's funny because I think back to when I started listening to podcasts, and really what got me back into Disney as an adult, not that I was out of it completely, was like Inside the Magic and Lou Mangello and WW Today. But when you would talk to people and say, oh, I heard this podcast, people will look at you like you were crazy. Whereas now it's gotten more, but I feel like I still feel like it's trending upward. Like we haven't hit the point where it's like going to level off. So that's exciting, I'm sure, doing that for you and for me to a more recent extent, because you feel like it's not all of a sudden going to drop out. It's only going to increase.
The thing, you know, that you noticed in the early days was that your listeners were they had to work to get your show. Like you mentioned, I mean, I remember the days of, if I knew it was a Tuesday night and, the listener question show for WDW Today was going to come out on Wednesday, as I got into the shower in the morning to go to school on Wednesday, I'd always take my big iPod Classic, plug it into my big desktop computer and sync it all up and make sure that I had iTunes running the night before so it would hopefully catch the new show. It was a lot of work to get those shows, but then it was worth it because I was getting content I couldn't get anywhere else and it was absolutely free. Nowadays, you download an app and you're set. You hit subscribe and you're good to go. And I think that's an exciting thing because, not only do I listen to Disney podcasts, which I've made such great friends with the other podcasters in the community and so many of our listeners. I've been in weddings for our listeners. We've done podcast cruises. I mean, we've had amazing experiences. But also, like I'm a reality TV fan. Like we were talking before we started recording, I get to hear what other people think about, what was that move? What were they thinking with that move on Survivor last night? Or why did they vote that person out on Big Brother, at this point of the game? To where it makes me more invested in the shows and in the, things like that. So I think it brings you have a community aspect. And I think that's what podcasting really does. It can build community very quickly. And I think that brings you into either, whether it's Disney, reality TV, tech news, it really gives you a reason to be a part of something bigger than just like a one-on-one conversation.
Definitely. And that's a really good example because, like we were saying, is that I'm really into the TV show Survivor and I've watched it since like the beginning. But in season 13, I was into it, but I wasn't as into it as I am now because of podcasts and because you can go and hear from people from all over the world who love this show. And that's the same thing with Disney. So I think you've done a very good job with your show, though, in building that community, because I don't want to understate it. A lot of people have podcasts, but not a lot of people are doing podcast cruises. So what do you think it is about what you've done that has really built that community where, compared to no one in particular, but just compared to others who might not have built it up the same way?
I think we just got in at the right time. I think that for somebody that's breaking into the podcasting game today, while it's not impossible at all, and it's going to be a fun adventure for anybody who jumps in. We started the show when there were maybe 10 or 15 Disney podcasts. So there wasn't as much, selection out there. If you're a Disney fan, you were probably going to stumble upon our show and hopefully you liked it. Some people probably didn't and went away. But, nowadays when you start, if I look on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or TuneIn or whatever, there's probably at least 150 to 200 Disney focused podcasts, whether it's movies or Disneyland or cruise or, what have you, many, many Walt Disney World ones. That it's just harder to kind of stand out and get people to check you out because you only have 24 hours in a day and you can only listen to so many shows. And, for myself, while I enjoy Disney podcasts, I also enjoy other topics, so I don't listen to every Disney podcast. I wish I could, but I, enjoy my Big Brother, my Survivor, and those things really soak me in during those seasons. There's a lot of content, and I listen to Leo Laporte's podcast on the Twit Network, which is all about technology and iOS stuff. And it's one of those things that I think it's really hard to kind of stand out. But I think, if you consistently put out a high quality product, even today, you will gain an audience and you will build a community. You just got to be patient. It's taken us 10 years, and with our podcast cruises, we just decided that we had enough listeners and we had enough people asking, if we could do events. I love cruising with Disney Cruise Line. So does Pam. So does Rikki, my co-host. And so we gave it a shot. And we said, if 10 people go with us, we're still going to have a cruise. We're going to have a good time with 10 people. So about 100 people sail with us that first time. We've had, that many each cruise. And it's an amazing thing because you get to have people that are already in the same mindset as you. Because if you're listening to this show today, that Disney fans are a different breed. We love this stuff. Oh my gosh, they changed the toilet paper in the Tomorrowland bathrooms. We get that when we're together. We can talk about Dole Whips and ice cream bars and stuff like that. Where the rest of the world just kind of is like, that's a pineapple ice cream. I don't get the whole, what's this all about? But I think that's what's great about Disney podcasts. It brings people together that already are 90% of the way there as far as their lexicon, their lingo, what they're passionate about. And, but also when you mention podcasting, I've thought this since I was a kid. I've always listened to AM radio. Growing up, even as a kid, we have a big station here in St. Louis called KMOX. It's one of the stations that carries all the way down into Cuba at night, 50,000 watt. And there was always overnight host. Jim White was one when I was a kid, and he would just talk about anything overnight starting at 10 o'clock. And I would go to bed with him talking and hanging up on people. And he was like an old curmudgeon, but I grew up with talk radio. And I think with podcasts, and I know this is true of everybody I listen to, I feel like I know the person because I've invested, like they've been in my ears for years, most of the shows I've listened to. And I hear about their kids, their wife, and, their husbands and just things like that. And you do almost develop this relationship. And I think that podcasting is very personal, just like AM radio could be.
Yeah. And that's a good point, because I know, when you've listened to someone for so long and you actually meet them in person, I'm sure you experience this when you go to the parks. People come up to you and they know you. And how does that experience go when people have heard so much about you and you've never met them, and it's like your friends, but it's in a different way?
It is very bizarre because, for one, I love it because my wife just rolls her eyes, because she swears. I go down into the studio in the basement, record the shows 3 times a week. And, I'm just talking to my computer, Rikki and Pam, and nobody's listening, and then, now she gets it because she's gone on the podcast cruises and everything and seen it. But, it cracks her up, when people come up like, can we get pictures? I'm like, yeah, sure. And it's so fun. But I try to always remember, and it's not that often. I mean, I'm not saying I'm just in things. I'm not, but I remember the first time I met Hotchberg and the first time I met Scopa, and folks like that meeting Lou. And I was like all sweaty palmed and stuff. I mean, they could have been, Walter Cronkite. It was like they were the guys I listened to, I trusted, I've laughed with for years, through their shows. And it was an honor to get to meet them and just thank them for doing the show. And so I try to remember that. But it is strange because they'll say stuff and I'm like, is this our first time meeting? Because you know so much about me, but it's because I'm so loose on the show. I'll share anything about my life. And it's strange, but it's very, very humbling because, one, anybody who gives you the time to listen to your show, that is such a precious thing because time is so valuable and there's so much great content out there that when they choose to listen to your show, that is a true honor. And then when somebody comes out of their way on a Disney vacation just to say hi, Disney vacations go by in a blink. Everybody knows that. And when somebody takes the time out to say hello, it's truly humbling. So I really do appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I haven't had that experience myself, but I'm not sure how I would react. It would be a different story. But I can imagine even just talking, I talked to Len Testa and I was like, oh, my gosh, I'm talking to this guy I've been listening to for 10 years. And he sounds just like, it's just very weird. It's such a different experience because of podcasting and because of the internet and how things have gone. So you also mentioned your co-host, Pam and Rikki, and I don't want to not mention them. How did you originally get connected with them? I know both started pretty early on in your show.
Yeah, so I always wanted to have I didn't want to just have myself doing the show. I want to have, a team, I guess. I've always thought that'd be kind of fun. And Rikki, when I used to DJ wedding receptions, I was the DJ, but her parents own a photography studio here in Florissant, where I live here in a suburb of St. Louis. And so actually her parents went to high school with my parents. So I had known Rikki. Actually, fun fact, I was a substitute teacher for Rikki's 6th grade class one day. That was kind of weird. That's how much older I am than her. But I knew she was a huge Disney fan. And as I was starting the podcast, I talked to her parents and, was like, well, this is what I'm thinking. This is what a podcast is, like a radio show, blah, blah. And, I said, do you think Rikki would want to share some of her Disney knowledge and do something like this? And her parents were like, yeah, get a hold of her. So I did. And she was interested. She's like, you know what you're doing? I was like, absolutely not. And she's like, me neither. I was like, well, okay, let's go. Let's give it a shot. And so we did. And then we picked up Pam, who owns one of the larger Disney-focused travel agencies, about 10 or 15 episodes in. What happened was we interviewed a guest that talked about their trip, and they went on and on. I didn't know anything about this at the point, but how great their travel agent was with, handling all the accommodations, the dining, whatever they needed. And they mentioned the travel agent by name in the Magic for Less Travel, which Pam owns. And Pam heard the show, or somebody heard the show and let Pam know. And she sent me this very nice email saying, thank you for putting that out there. Thank you for recognizing our agent. We really appreciate the kind words. And so I knew we still, weren't a full team yet. And so I was like, this isn't going to happen. But I was like, I'm going to ask her if she would come, maybe be a part of our team, because she was funny. Like, I got to talk to her on the phone once. And, I was like, well, if you're not too busy, we're doing this new podcast, it would give us a lot of credibility to have somebody that actually knows what's going on, like you work in the business. Oh, yeah, this sounds like fun. So, once Pam joined the team, that's where it all came together, because I truly believe that, this is her business. This is what she does every day, all day. And she gave us credibility because, she works directly with the higher ups with Disney, so it wasn't just two of us from the Midwest yapping off about what we think so much. It was also having, somewhat credibility with somebody who is invested. This is her livelihood. And I think the three of us work well together. It's funny, after 10 years of doing a show, almost 10 years, it'll be 10 years in March, we truly are a family. I mean, we have our little spats every once in a while, nothing serious, but, we have our opinions, and we also just love each other to death. They are like sisters to me. I don't know what I would do without them. I'm just so lucky to have them in my life. And it's truly a blessing to have a family like Pam and Rikki. They've meant a lot to me over the years.
Yeah, and it's funny how it all comes together, like you mentioned, with Rikki's parents, and then even with Pam, where you were doing a show and just kind of it went from there. It almost seemed like it's by chance, but now that you guys have been doing it for so long, it came together well. And I think that's important because the way you structure your show, you've got, you do one thing that I've noticed that you do that not as many shows do is kind of the listener trip reports, where you interview a listener and kind of hear what they've done and what they've had to do. What made you think when you were kind of getting started, or when you set that up, that was a good way to go?
Well, I remember, before I started the show, one of the things I enjoyed doing, this was, again, in the infancy of Disney podcasting, was, and I think everybody's passed through the Diz boards, one of the big V bulletin sites. That was kind of the one place to go pre-Twitter, to get all your information and to read everybody's opinions on everything Disney. So I'll go over to the Diz boards and read trip reports. I loved them, and especially the ones where people would put in pictures or, whatever it was. The more in-depth it was, the more personal. If they made it like a journal, all the better. I loved hearing their opinions and their experiences on their trips. I thought, this is awesome. This is getting to read somebody's personal journal of their Walt Disney World trip. And in my mind's eye, I pictured walking down the street with them, whether it was Main Street or Sunset or, what have you. And I thought, what? This would be great if somebody could just come on and talk about it, because that way you could listen to it in your ears while you're on a run, while you're grading papers at the time. It's just something that not only is it kind of research, but it's just fun to escape for a few minutes. And that's kind of the genesis of our show. It was just going to be trip reports. That's all we were planning on. That's why we got the name Be Our Guest. Come on the show, be our guest, talk about your trip. And then, obviously we did kind of, expand that out, almost the WDW Today model, with listener questions midweek, and then some kind of a topical show on Friday, to expand it out. But yeah, I mean, I think everybody's trip has a definite story, and those Monday shows are really something, because that trip that guest is sharing on a Monday, it's super special. That is something that I hope that they take that show and they have that as a memory for their trip. I love that it's out there, and I love listening to them, because, you hear about a child's first haircut, or you hear about, a couple getting engaged at Cinderella Castle. I mean, that's what it's all about. That's a way better, I'd much rather listen to that than some heavy news on a Monday morning. That's why it's the Monday morning show. A lot of stuff can be heavy coming off the weekend. I want to start the week the right way.
Yeah, and I've spent plenty of time on the Diz boards, probably lost work productivity, with especially some people's trip reports are so detailed. Like they just like day one, and they put in, especially back, like you said, pre-Instagram and Twitter, where like pictures from people's trips of everything was really like an amazing thing. But yeah, I'll admit that I've fallen down that rabbit hole many times, but it is kind of nice to get a summary like, audio like you guys do. Plus you can interact more and ask questions, and that's really cool. So that I think you tapped into something right away. And plus having travel agent on there, that also, well, not always on that part, but just with your show, it also, I think, leads to that whole, that you guys are there to help out. You're there to help people plan their trips. And that's important, because Disney World is really complicated, as you know, and seems to be getting more that way. And I know you're involved sometimes as a travel agent. So I've talked to like family members and friends when they're going for the first time. And I'm just curious, when you're working with guests, like when you do that and it's their first trip or something, What are the hardest things to do? Like, what do you find the most challenging to try and explain about Disney World and how kind of complex and crazy it is?
That's a great question, because I think when somebody's going for the very first time, and especially I think it's different for folks maybe that are East Coast residents as opposed to folks that we might meet. For example, I was an elementary school teacher for 17 years. So I was around, a lot of teachers that had young families, and they all knew I was the Disney guy, because I would have, my Disney shirts I'd teach in, and my room always had, many touches of Disney. And they would come to me, and they would have no idea. I think, the way I like to liken it is that a lot of the teachers would compare it to a Six Flags experience, and here in St. Louis, we have a, Six Flags theme park about 45 minutes away. Everybody makes the pilgrimage. You just go out for the day, you ride some rides, you have some food and some ice cream, and you come home. With Walt Disney World, you really have to, especially like you said, with, my Disney experience and the online aspect of your trip, you need to make some preparations, whether it's dining reservations, FastPass reservations. You don't have to have, I'm not one that says you got to have an Excel spreadsheet to tell you what time you're going to go to the bathroom on Tuesday afternoon. I'm way against that, but I want you to have 3 fast passes a day. I want you to have a good place to eat at least once a day. And then you can go from there, build out from there, because without plans, it can become overwhelming. 4 theme parks, over 20 hotels, 2 water parks, golf courses, you name it, it's there. But I think a lot of folks that are going for the first time, they really need to kind of, narrow the focus. You can't see everything, but you should have a good time in the Magic Kingdom. You should try to probably visit all 4 parks if you can, but really focus maybe on the Magic Kingdom. And if the kid's into, Star Wars, go to the studios, quite a bit. Or, if you really want to see some science and some, world cultures, go to Epcot. But I think you need to, guide them, think about what the interests are. And you don't have to go to Typhoon Lagoon and Blizzard Beach and play around and, get a spa treatment at the Grand Floridian. You cannot do it all, but, just make the times that you have rich. Don't try to see everything at a paper thin level. Have some deep, rich experiences, and then come back another time and see some more stuff.
Well, I think that advice, I could probably take that advice myself when I go, even though I go more often. Just because there is that tendency to want to be like, we have to maximize it. And there's, touringplans.com where I've got my whole list and everything. And it never really goes that way at all. So I think I can't imagine going there for the first time, but I'm sure that's really good advice, because like Six Flags, like you mentioned, I take my daughter there. We'll go, once or twice or whatever, here and there. And it's pretty easy. They're like, okay, here's the 8 things we want to do. The lines won't be too bad. We'll just go in there and we'll eat, whatever. Disney World's different, as you know, and more expensive. So I'm sure that's a challenge to deal with for anyone who's trying to help someone plan a trip.
Yeah, it is, because we want you to get great value out of that money, and value doesn't necessarily mean the lowest price. We do say this on the show. I didn't come up with this. Pam, this is her thing. She's preached for years that, just because you can get like the lowest price vacation, that may not be the best value, because you want to think about everybody having a quality experience where maybe you can get a vacation for $2,000 at a value resort for, 5 or 6 days, but you have, 2 adults and 2 teenagers, where for $200 more, you could upgrade to a moderate resort. Everybody has a little bit more room. You have a nicer pool. You have on-site dining. For that $200, you're getting a very increased quality of your stay. You're getting a better experience. So I think, everybody's got what they're looking for. Some people don't want to have any table service meals, and that's great. That's fine. But some people go down for the food, and that's hugely important to them. So you got to really think about, is this somebody that's going to never go to the resort? Like some people get up, they're at rope drop, and God love them, they have the stamina to be there till the park closes. I'm getting too old for that. I can't do it. I go back, I take a nap, or I'll swim in the pool in the afternoon. We're usually there in the summer and it's hot. So everybody's got a different way to see Walt Disney World. And I think Dan, I think you've probably seen this, that there is a way for everybody to do Walt Disney World, or, the Disney destinations their own way. If you can go for 14 hours, that's awesome, but also I have a great time going for 4 hours in the morning, going back and taking a nap, taking a dip, and then going back, in the evening at about 6 o'clock and having a good solid 6 hours at night. So that works for me, but everybody's got their way. And I think everybody's got to use that to their advantage and see Disney the way that they like it.
Yeah, I'm still learning, because I kind of know what I can do. I'm one who wants to just go, But I have two daughters who are 8 and 4, and I'm still learning how that works for them, because you can do one of those marathon days, not literally the marathon, but one of those long days, and you can't do 4 of those in a row with kids, unless there's people I know that have kids that can do it. But in general, it's not going to be as fun of an experience. So I think that's a trick, trying to find that balance, because it's different for everybody, and it's more exhausting even when it's not super hot. When it's super hot, that's another story, but it's more exhausting than it seems.
Well, that's a great point too with the kids. I'm sorry, but if you try to push the kids too hard, if you can make it, that's fine. But I know, like, for example, I have a daughter who's 9 and my other daughter's obviously in college. If we push her too hard, even at 9 in the summer, and even if, like, for myself, like, if I go too long, too hard, or like I don't eat at a regular schedule because, I'm one that I like to exercise. I'm a runner, and if I get hungry, man, I get hangry, I get mean, and people have seen this. I'm sure people have seen, and my daughter is exactly the same. So you have to know yourself, your family, because, as much as some days I want to go for 12 hours, she'll have horns sticking out of her head if we try that. So it's just like, okay, so we're sacrificing 5 hours here. We're going to go back and swim. She'll be happy. She loves swimming. And it's going to hedge our bets that we're going to have a good evening, because if we come back after a little rest in the afternoon, in the evening, we're going to have a fun night. Now, if I stay here all day, that night's going to be, we'll be here, but it's going to be miserable.
Yeah, and then you start to wonder, what are we doing? What are we paying for?
Paying all this money, just to yell at each other here, because you don't want to do anything. I just want to, I want you to be happy, but I'm yelling at you to be happy. This isn't helping anything, exactly.
Yeah. So I do also want to mention, you're very involved with RunDisney, and I have not had a guest on before who's been that involved in that way. So I'm curious, I know almost nothing about RunDisney besides there are races and people do them and people like them. So for somebody like me who knows very little, how would you describe the experience of like doing a race at Walt Disney World?
And somebody just posted on our running team, because we have an associated running team with our podcast. The Dopey Challenge starts 10 weeks from today that we're recording. I'm like, oh my gosh, 10 weeks. Holy cow, it's going to be here for now. But what it is, it's just an arm of Disney that they put on races at the Disney destinations, Walt Disney World. Now, they were doing them at Disneyland. They've put those on the back burner while they're doing some construction out there. They run some races in Paris. But it's just, they have from your 5K all the way up to your full marathon. And it gives you an excuse really to get you down there. They schedule these races in what used to be typically the off seasons, January, February, April. They would have races in, mid-November for the wine and dine and so forth. And they would just basically start as a way to get people down to the destinations during off seasons. They became very popular though, because what I've seen, and let me just tell you, I hated running. I hated it. Like, I remember at high school baseball tryouts, I was a left-handed pitcher, 6'3". They wanted me on the team. I could throw hard, but we had 120 guys try out for the team, and there were only like 15 slots. So they had to find a way to cut people. And one of the ways they were cutting people was you had to run 2 miles in less than 20 minutes, or else you wouldn't be considered. There was no way I was running 2 miles in less than 20 minutes in high school. I hated it. And I was like, and I tried. And like the best I could ever do was 24 minutes or something like that. Fortunately, they bent the rules so I could be on the team. But it was like I hated running. But then I saw that by just doing a little bit of running, I could get a Disney vacation out of it. I could go down for a weekend, run a race. You get an awesome medal. And the thing is, the races are so much fun. You got characters on the course. You have awesome announcers. You have people with awesome signs. I mean, everybody's like loving the runners. It's just and I'm a sports guy, so it's just such a great, awesome environment, very friendly, non-competitive. We decided to kind of start a running team with our podcast. Our listeners wanted to kind of bond together and have a running team. We have a great captain who came from Team All Ears when they broke up, Mr. Mike Bankhead. Just an inspiration to me. He's marathoned many times, a cancer survivor, and just has the biggest heart of anybody I've met on planet Earth. I love the gentleman. And he leads our group, and we're 1,250 runners strong now, and we support each other. We have people that they'll walk, and that's all they can do. And that was me, so that's awesome. But then we have people that we've had folks that have won some of the RunDisney races, that are on our team too. So we have everything in between, but basically what we're all out there to do is have a good time, support each other, and we raise money for Give Kids the World. So that's, that's a nice trifecta. We're getting a little bit healthier. We're having a great time. We're getting extra Disney vacations out of it. Shh, don't tell anybody. And, doing a little good in the process too. So we're very, very lucky.
Wow, I think I found a secret way to take like a weekend Disney vacation now. I need to write this down.
That's it. That's what I found when I ran my first race. It was marathon weekend, I think 2009, because I was signed up in 2008, but my daughter was born in January of 2008. So couldn't go that year. So I went the next year, and that was the year that it actually snowed during the half marathon in Florida. That's right. Unfortunately, back then I was driving. So I left St. Louis in January. So I had like a coat in my car. I had, a bunch of clothes, but I didn't pack any warm clothes. So what I did was race morning when it was in the 30s and sleeting and snowing, I went out to my car and I just put on everything that I brought. I had like 6 layers. So we survived. It was ridiculously cold and miserable, but we got a story out of it. Now I can say forever I ran a half marathon in Central Florida in the snow and sleet. I realized I got a vacation out of that. I got 3 days of Disney fun. I only had to run 13 miles. Wasn't too bad. It was 3 hours misery, basically. But, but over the years, it's changed now because it's something, for me now, it's a great way to get down there and spend awesome time with so many friends, because we have this running team. We all run these races together. So marathon weekend, we'll be down there. Hundreds of literally, there'll probably be 100 or 200 runners off the team that are going to be running in marathon weekend. We have our bright green shirts, and it's just great to cheer for each other, run with each other, and, celebrate with each other. So I can't wait.
Yeah, I mean, that's 1,200 runners. That's impressive. That's quite a team. I don't think, that shows just, that's got to make it so much more fun to go down there just to see people that you're seeing at each race, probably. It's almost like another side of the community that you've got there.
It is. It's really awesome because, the thing about running is that we all do our training runs, and I know that it stinks, especially training for marathon weekend in St. Louis. My long run will be the week before Christmas. And in St. Louis, it could be 60 that day, crossing my fingers, but it could also be 20 with a wind chill of like 0, and I'm out there for 4.5, 5 hours doing a training run. Every person that's down there has their story. They've put in the time. And we just get together, we celebrate. We have meals at Via Napoli. We go to Trails End and have 40 or 50 of us eating dinner together. And we talk to each other. We encourage each other through social media all year long and post our triumphs, in our training runs and so forth. But getting together and being able to, give somebody a hug at the finish line or high five somebody as they're passing you by while you're cheering them on during a race. Nothing like that, and I've teared up because I've seen so many victories of people that have overcome huge obstacles in their life to get to where they are. People have lost, so much weight that you wouldn't imagine. People have overcome medical illnesses, or afflictions that they've had. And, just to see people just laying it all out there, they've brought you into this small circle that you can be a part of their team. It's a pretty special thing. So I love seeing, as much as I like participating, I love just kind of standing back and watching everybody on the team because they amaze me. They keep me going.
That sounds like a really great experience. And you also mentioned Give Kids the World briefly, and I wanted to ask you about your 12-hour podcast that you've been doing, I know, to raise money for Give Kids the World. It looks like you raised more than $30,000 this year, which is awesome. So what's that like? I mean, doing that, how did that come together, that 12-hour podcast? And what's it like to actually do it for that long?
Yeah. I do not even know. I probably came up with the idea of it just joking with Pam and Rikki, like, we should do this, and that's pretty much my life. Like, when I was teaching elementary school, our principal gave us a test. I believe it was called the COGAT personality test. And you got put into, like 4 categories of how you tend to work. And I remember I was a quick start, the highest on the staff, which meant I'm one of the idea people. Like, I'm one of the people like, we should do this at school. And then I'm not a follow through though. Like, I'm not one who would usually get it done. I'd have the ideas, but like, I'd always move on to the next thing. Okay, let's try this. Okay, let's try this. And my principal was the same way, so we got along well. But we had to have the other people to follow through with all the details to get everything done. So I probably said, well, that'd be awesome. Let's do it for 12 hours and do like a radiothon or something. So we started it. We tried it. Our listeners responded well. And what we did was over the years, we just kind of divided the hours up and invited other podcasters to come on and hopefully share with their audiences. Hey, I'm going to be on the Be Our Guest podcast from 4 to 5. Come on in. If you like our show, donate a little to Give Kids the World. And what it gives us an opportunity to do is talk with our friends in the Disney community, other podcasters who, we've really become close with over the years. But also, it gives the Disney community as a whole an opportunity to come together to support some awesome families and some really great people down at Give Kids the World. And I can just say that the Disney community, not just the Be Our Guest podcast listeners, but especially them, are so absolutely generous when it comes to people in need, and especially families and especially children that are overcoming just amazing obstacles and terrible difficulties. And just, the folks not only open up their wallets in a tremendous way. We've raised, over the 6 or 7 years we've done it, just lots and lots of money for them because of our listeners. But more importantly, our listeners take time out of their vacations now, go to Give Kids the World, and they'll take a day and go volunteer, whether they're driving the train or picking folks up from the airport, whatever, serving ice cream in the ice cream palace. It's just an amazing thing that the Disney community, there's so many people in the Disney community are my family, my friends, but as a whole, it's just, we're so blessed to be a part of this because the folks who are a part of, your show, my show, all these shows, they just have tremendous hearts and they care about their fellow man. So it's a special thing to be part of. And I'm just glad that we can be a small part of that.
No, that's awesome. I mean, it's great to hear, and it doesn't surprise me. Just what I've seen through your podcasts and through like the Diz and what they do for Give Kids the World. It's amazing how many people they can get out to help with that and with other causes. It's really cool. So I want to wind down soon, but we've been talking so much about what you've done on your show and all that, and we haven't really talked much about what you like to do at Disney World. So I put together. I've never done this before. This is a first time here, Mike. So this could not go well here. We'll see. But a series of rapid fire questions. I'm just going to ask you a few quick questions about what things you like at Disney World, and the first thing that comes to your head, you can just tell me. Does that sound okay?
I need a Rob Cesternino bell, but let's give it a run. See what happens.
Okay. And so they're not that hard. I'm not testing trivia. It's not about like, what's the name of that guy in Spaceship Earth? Nothing like that. This is about your opinions, just to give you that heads up. Okay,
all right,
so here we go.
That would be Steve Jobs, but go ahead now. Okay.
Yes. All right, here we go. What is your favorite restaurant at Walt Disney World?
Rapid fire. Let me think. I guess it would be tonight because it changes every day. Kona Cafe at the Polynesian.
Nice. What is the best nighttime spectacular or your favorite one at Walt Disney World?
Easy. Illuminations, Reflections of Earth.
That is correct. Now move on.
Good stuff.
What is the least of all the resorts you've stayed? What is your least favorite at Disney World?
Right now it's Caribbean Beach because there's no food court and it's 2/3 gone. But it'll be awesome in a couple of years. But that's kind of the easy answer because it's missing a lot of amenities.
Yeah. I think it's going to be cool with the gondolas and everything. I'm not making this rapid fire. I'm not supposed to interact. All right. What is your favorite place to go when you go to Disney Springs?
You know what? This is so weird. Uniqlo. And I never would have thought that. Give me a restaurant, but this crazy Japanese cheap Old Navy type store.
I heard Lentesta raving about it, so I know it's not just you.
Oh, it's weird. I went in there and had no idea what they sold, but it's so weird. It's cheap stuff.
Okay. If you drive to the Magic Kingdom, do you take the monorail or the ferry?
Monorail every time. It's futuristic. It's the highway in the sky.
Who's going to win this season of Survivor?
Oh man, I'm going for Ben.
Yeah, I think Ben is one of the he's one of the top contenders, I will say. What is your favorite snack at Walt Disney World?
The chicken waffle at Sleepy Hollow.
Another good choice. Very good. Okay, at Epcot, what is your favorite attraction?
Living with the Land.
Yes. I need a bell for this. I really do. What Food and Wine Festival or Flower and Garden Festival?
Food and Wine Festival.
Yeah.
Because they have.
What attraction would you not miss if it closed?
PhilharMagic.
Interesting. Stitch would have been the answer, but that is already closed.
But it's already gone. It's neat.
All right, just a couple more. Which of the future Disney World expansions are you most excited about?
Absolutely Star Wars. Now, I might not ever get into it because I think you got a lineup starting tomorrow, but that's beside the point.
All right. Last one. Will Mizzou basketball make the NCAA tournament this season?
The correct answer should be, will Mizzou make the Final Four? Yes.
All right. Well, that was good. You did a good job. I was wondering how that would go. I've never tried that before, but you've been doing this for so long, I knew you'd have answers.
Well, I have opinions. I don't know if they're right answers, but I have an opinion on most things.
There is no right answer except for Illuminations and maybe a few others.
No, good.
All right. So with your podcast, you've been doing it for almost 10 years. What's the future? Are there projects you want to do that you haven't done? You're an ideas guy. What are you kind of thinking going forward?
Well, we're expanding out into video. We've been, we toyed with it a couple months ago with doing almost a daily quick hit video show. And that is still being worked on. I know people are kind of asking where to go. We're doing some stuff behind the scenes with that, building out a YouTube channel as well behind the scenes. So I think that you got to have a little bit of video to survive, moving forward. So we're adapting to that. But, our focus will always be the audio show. I think there's something special about having somebody in your ear, like I said earlier in the show, building that relationship with somebody that you listen to weekly or, a couple times, 3 times a week. The audio format is special. And I always want to stick to that because I grew up listening, to audio and I love it. And I think that's something that'll never go away.
Yeah, I agree because, video, I love some of the channels and what podcasts that are doing video, but I'm not going to watch that in my car. I'm not going to watch that when I'm sitting at work. And those are things that podcasts allow me to do. I listen to podcasts. That's all I do when I drive. So I think I like that idea. I think it's smart, though I'll be curious to see what happens with video. So, Mike, it's great having you on the show. This has been so much fun. If listeners who are not aware of your show, which I think is unlikely, but if they aren't and they want to connect with you, where should they go online?
Just catch me on Twitter or Instagram. I'm at Be Our Guest Mike, or you can come by our Facebook page. It's facebook.com/Be Our Guest Podcast, or you can just go to the website, beourguestpodcast.com. But we'd love to see everybody. That'd be awesome.
Excellent. And I look forward to seeing Mizzou do very well in basketball. And then next year, the Cardinals rebounding and doing well again.
Let me get this on the record. Mizzou football is going to make a bowl game this year. We're going to make a strong comeback second half of the season. We're going to beat Tennessee. We're going to beat Vandy. We're going to beat Arkansas. And we're going to beat Connecticut. So just wait.
Wow. If I was a betting man, I might but I would love to see it. So I hope you're right. I'm excited to see if it happens.
We'll see.
All right. Thanks a lot, Mike.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.
If you'd like to keep up to date with what's happening at the Tomorrow Society and go back to the archives of past podcast episodes, you can go to tomorrowsociety.com. You can also stay in touch with me through social media at TomorrowSOC on Twitter or Tomorrow Society on Facebook or Instagram. If you'd like to get a hold of me, you can reach out by email, dan@tomorrowsociety.com. The music for this show is written by Adam Hookey and performed by the Sophisticated Babies. Check out Adam's excellent album by going to adamhucke.com. This podcast is hosted, edited, and produced by me, Dan Heaton. Thank you so much for listening once again, and I will talk to you again very soon.